This is your room. I'll at least give you sheets for your bed. You look like you want to say something.
I can still remember when I first got into JRPGs. It was thanks to a family holiday up in Queensland where my dad bought me a copy of Final Fantasy X, and so began a love affair with a genre that I committed more time to than I did with high school. Sadly, it would be many years until I would find another game that could captivate me in the same way 10 did, and it really didn't help that the JRPG genre went to a brief decline around the time of Final Fantasy XIII's release. But this game not only manages to do what Final Fantasy X did, that the JRPG genre is really back. Persona 5 is the latest entry in Atlus's cult series developed for PS4 and PS3, and has so far been my top pick for Game of the Year. Now that doesn't mean this game is flawless, it is held back by a number of flaws that will make it hard for some people to get into it, but that won't stop you from having an absolute ball with it either.
Necessary. I am in the restaurant business, you know.
In terms of narrative, the story takes a departure from the lighter tone of Persona 4 for something a little bit darker. The player character is now someone who has been wrongly convicted of assault and sent off to live with a guardian while they're on probation, only to be met with suspicion from his new classmates and contempt from corrupt adults, as he finds himself pulled into the supernatural shenanigans of the Velvet Room and its occupants. As a whole, it's up to the same caliber as the writing for 4, but maybe it's the fact I'm Australian saying this, or my love of morally questionable heroes, but I found the protagonist in this game being a juvenile criminal much more engaging than just some random high school student. It opens the door for more interesting character interactions and a fresh perspective to see things from, primarily that of someone who's unofficially at the bottom rung of society. And it also makes it so much more satisfying to really stick it to some corrupt authority figures, especially when they spend a good deal of time gloating about how they're gonna make your life a living hell.
What a troublesome situation.
The new companions for the game aren't too bad either, and they've got some really interesting personal drama that can keep the main narrative from feeling too dry or one note. Like the cocky Ryuji, who's a nice combination of Yusuke and Kanji from Persona 4, whose story of personal redemption will make you want to train with him whenever you can. Or the school beauty Anne's struggle with rumours of promiscuity and jealousy from her peers. And let's not forget the mysterious creature Morgana, who's on a personal quest to find out who he or she really is. All the game's companions are well realised and fleshed out, with their personal stories engaging enough to make you care all the more about them than you would in something like, say, Mass Effect Andromeda. This also feeds into one of the game's two core gameplay styles, making it less of a slog and much more addictive than it has any right to be.
Let's go.
You see, gameplay goes back and forth between third-person dungeon crawling with semi-random enemy encounters and a Japanese high school life simulator, the latter of which is spiced up by your companion's personal stories.
Are you really a bad person, as the rumor says? You just don't seem like it.
How it works is that each day is divided into 2 or 3 segments, and you have to strategically choose what to do with your limited time. Foster stronger relationship bonds with companions and characters, do mini-games to improve passive character stats and bonds, or progress through the main story. While this does seem like a solid idea at first, it can be frustrating with how strict and misleading it can be. Outside of school, which takes up most mornings, you can use the subway to go to any number of different locations, and not even a second will pass. But the second you go up to your room to do something like make lockpicks to use in the dungeons, suddenly you've lost your entire afternoon and Morgana is forcing you to go to bed. Unless the story demands it, you're always at the mercy of a schedule that never communicates how much time you have to do what. But it's when you realise this that Persona 5's most unique feature really proves its worth. If your PS4 or PS3 is connected to the PlayStation Network, you can access a thieves network and find out what other players did, and make an informed choice based on that. While it's a nice feature, personally I really wish they integrated a Dark Souls style communication system with it. Like, that would have just been awesome to be able to troll other players in the dungeons and whatnot. But as it is, it feels like Atlus knew people would get annoyed with the live sim portions and their time constraints and thought this would just be a good way to alleviate the frustration. And it does, but it would have been even more of an improvement if these segments were just more liberal with what we could do and when. If nothing else, they do encourage the player to prioritize strategic planning and forethought before doing anything, so maybe there is some genius there. But that doesn't make up for the countdown timer, which is the most inaccurate counter I've ever seen. Like, don't be fooled. When it says you've got 20 days to clear a dungeon, you've actually got 19. So, plan ahead.
Nice going!
All right.
But now let's get into the dungeon crawling side of things. It's more or less the same to what we got in previous Persona games, but with one new addition, an emphasis on stealth. Now don't go thinking this means Persona 5 is Assassin's Creed, but there is a bigger emphasis on getting the drop on enemies not only for a strategic advantage, but because the dungeon crawling is themed around being a thief. Just a shame the stealth feels so stiff and unpolished. You can only hide behind the corners of walls and furniture, and once there, the camera's movement becomes so limited you can't really see where the enemies are, so the only way for you to move forward is to jump out and potentially risk triggering an alarm and raising the enemy encounter rate. And that's just the issue with stealth in the open areas. In the linear areas like hallways, if you hide behind something, it screws up nearby enemy pathfinding, and they'll just keep going back and forth between you and some arbitrary point, literally forcing you into combat whether you wanted it or not. At least the dungeons are full of charm and personality with their art directions, so even if the stealth frustrates you, you can get up and close and try to appreciate the art. Plus, you also get to hear enemies talk about their personal gripes while in stealth, and what they have to say is really entertaining, so that kinda makes up for the stealth system's gripes. Combat, on the other hand, is what you'd expect from a JRPG. You got the traditional turn-based combat, but with an emphasis on strategic use of character abilities and exploiting enemy weaknesses. Yeah, giving it a nice degree of strategic depth, and has made an experience you'll almost always look forward to, thanks largely to the fun battle theme Last Surprise. But since this is the only song for combat outside the boss themes, do expect to get tired of it. Not to mention, it's easy to fall into the mindset of just mindlessly spamming attack or spamming known enemy weaknesses just to try to skip through the battles as quickly as possible. One thing that could have spiced the combat up though was the interesting inclusion of guns. But don't be fooled, it just ends up being a limited alternative to the standard attack option, and it really doesn't serve a purpose other than just to add a new weakness to the list of enemy weaknesses. However, one addition that's not only new, but adds genuine depth to combat is the ability to hold enemies hostage. In previous entries, if all enemies were stunned, you could choose to have your party dogpile them for an extra strong attack, but now you can choose to do that, or force them to bribe you with money or items for their lives, or convince them to join you and become new personas. And these moments, they never stop being fun, because the recruitment aspect turns Persona 5 into an awesomely unintended Pokemon tribute. Persona 5, gotta catch 'em all.
Okay.
But now let's get into the boss battles. Boy howdy do these get intense. This is where the real challenge of the game lies, as these will really test your mettle and your strategic thinking, just with how unforgiving they can be thanks to the unique challenge each one brings to the table. Like one boss fight in particular has different body parts that are healed by certain attacks but damaged by others. However, be careful because the boss fights can bring such huge spikes in difficulty that you will be forgiven for lowering the difficulty just to make it easier. In fact, now that I think about it, combat in general can be unnecessarily unforgiving overall because of one thing. If the player character is beaten, regardless of the status of everyone else, you get an instant game over. This has the unfortunate effect of making the player value the protagonist's life above all others, and it disincentivizes risk-taking for fear that it'll cost you a game over, something that's easily avoidable in other games. This was a huge annoyance in Persona 4, and I can't think of any reason why Atlus would friggin' leave it in 5, other than to just mess with us. That major issue aside, the combat as a whole is a pleasing mix of old with a little bit of new. The soundtrack's nice too. It's got more of a smooth jazz vibe than anything else like J-pop or orchestral, and it may put some people off at first, I know it did me, but give it a chance and there's bound to be at least one song that you'll genuinely enjoy listening to, even if the soundtrack does feel a little one note thanks to how often you hear the one main battle theme. Now, with all that being said, if you haven't played Persona 5 and you've got access to a PlayStation 4 or a PlayStation 3, what are you doing listening to me? Go out and get a copy. Persona 5 is a masterfully crafted game that does have a few flaws here and there. Hell, name me a game that doesn't, that'll keep fans of JRPGs enthralled and casual onlookers satisfied. Not only is this my current candidate for best game of the year, but it's hands down one of the best games to come out this year so far. Get it and see why so many people love this series so much. You will not regret it.
Why don't we go on the last day of the holidays? It'll help energize us when school life starts up again the day after.
Then, the 5th, on Children's Day.
Awesome, thanks for watching this video, really appreciate it. If you really like this video, then how about you like, favorite, and subscribe. If you're watching this video on VidMe, then how about you also tip me $1 or $2, I'd really appreciate that. Anyway, I should have coming out pretty soon a review of Layers of Fear, and then next month I'm taking a look at Mass Effect Andromeda and the new Prey. In terms of movie reviews, I'll be getting out Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2 first, and then some other stuff, like a review of Get Out. But all that more coming up, so stick around.